So I'm joined today by Richard Parker, Corporate Sales Manager from GreenFleet. Hello, Richard.
Hello, John. Nice to see you.
And you again, because we were on the EV rally recently, and GreenFleet were there gathering lots of information and data. What drew you to the EV rally as an organisation?
Well, we've been doing it for 3 years now. I think we joined, the first one we did was Evros after COP26, and that's, I guess there's a couple of reasons. The first one is that, GreenFleet as an organisation and what they're trying to achieve, in terms of decarbonising transport and people learning about what it takes to decarbonise transport. Why wouldn't we get involved? It's such an important subject and a way to support it. From our side personally, actually, you look at the people taking part in the EV rally, and there is a plethora of experts and people who have been there, done it, buying the T-shirt and more. Why would you not take the opportunity to learn to that collective group over a week and take all the stories back and go, okay, well, this is the next problem that needs to be solved. How are we as data suppliers going to help people understand the insights that are needed to resolve those issues? So that's a really key point for us, that rarely do you get that many people in the same arena for a whole week, all talking about one very specific subject, which is decarbonisation of transport, and not take the opportunity to learn from it. So that's predominantly why we support it.
And you also brought along some people who have never driven an electric vehicle and never charged an electric vehicle. What was their experience like?
Oh, when you spoke to a couple of them, didn't you? When we were at Fastned? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the point as well. Is you and I have talked on a few occasions. Is that we whilst these people are all experts, sometimes we've got to make sure it's not an echo chamber. And so for our part, we had 2 vehicles in the rally, but me specifically, every day had people who had never been in an EV, let alone charged one, let alone understood what the infrastructure can look like and how it works. So, and by and large, actually, the people who did it was a really successful exercise. And actually, every single one of them said, actually, this is nothing like I thought it was going to be, in a really positive way. So they have gone away. And one of those people that were in the car are actually tire fitting providers. Won't say which name it is, but they went away saying, we need to get involved in this. We need to start becoming a part of this, because actually we've learned so much, and people will arrive into our sites with EVs, and we need to know what this is all about and going forward. So I think we've managed to encourage another organisation to also start thinking about getting involved in a way that they've never done before. So success all round.
True ambassadors. I mean, it was an incredible journey. You think about it, 1,200 miles, 50 different vehicles, cars, vans and trucks up to 22 tons in 5 capital cities. So Cardiff, London, Edinburgh, Belfast, Dublin, with 100 or so people involved. Every single vehicle made it that 1,200-mile journey. What were the key things that you learned about public charging infrastructure on that journey?
Right. I suppose let's start with when we were in Wales and England and Scotland. Actually, from when I started on 3 years, just how far the infrastructure is moving year on year. I mean, even from last year to this year, you could see a real step change in certain aspects of the infrastructure in terms of the growth of ultra rapids on the network and everything else. So that was really fascinating. To move across on the ferry and then go into the Belfast and the Dublin legs, the reality was it did feel like we'd moved back 5 years. From where England was potentially. But again, the conversation is it has to be relevant, that the infrastructure has to match the volume that's incoming, and no charge point operator is going to put in so much hardware in the ground and with that investment if the activity on the unit is not going to match the investment for them. So it's going like for like, and I think we're just seeing, the England piece was actually brilliant, and as you say, actually, in all instances, we forced the infrastructure in a way that perhaps it wouldn't naturally be done, because 50 vehicles all traveling the same route effectively, to certain destinations at the same time. And So you put in a stress on the infrastructure that perhaps wouldn't be the normal day-to-day stresses as well that you'd see within it. But I did notice a change this year as well in the way that, and you've got to give Mr. Sam Clark credit for this, but I think we really did start to see the charging when you stop, not stop to charge.
Absolutely.
And the shift in that, and we're still pulling the data, but one of the things I've asked our team to look at in terms of outputs of charging behaviors for the vehicles that we did track was actually how much overnight charging was there versus the stop and charge. Because anecdotally to me, especially with the locations where we were staying overnight, there wasn't charging infrastructure.
Yeah.
So I'm really looking to see. We'll have the outputs in the next few weeks, but looking to see where actually what was the average length of charging cycle. Did it really show this kind of like stop and go? Because if it did, that tells me for operational commercial vehicles, that's the start of the options that lay forth when you haven't got driveways and depots, and starting to think about the solutions that come in that scenario as we move through commercial vehicles.
Did you identify any particular challenges whilst on the EV Rally? And if you did, how have they been overcome? Because I know the trucks, for instance, they physically are so much bigger than a traditional, car or a van. Does that provide some challenges for the guys that were driving them?
Well, clearly, when on one site, I know we covered about 8 parking bays with the Mercedes, didn't we? It was a particular challenge in Ireland. I have to say, I was in a car. The biggest challenge that I faced over in Ireland was having to reach a charge point 60 kilometers away with a range of 60 kilometers remaining in the vehicle, which was the first time I've ever encountered. So I've got to be honest, that's the first time I have ever experienced what we would be calling charging anxiety. Am I going to get there? Is it going to work? Because I've got nothing spare should it not be working. Now it was working. So even over there where perhaps infrastructure is more limited in volume, it was reliable. You turned up and it worked. So I didn't have a single failed charging session at all across the whole 1,600 miles that we did, and so.
Did you modify your behavior, your driving behavior, knowing that you only had the precise amount of range that you needed?
I did, yeah, and I had a motoring journalist with me at the time, and who was a local, so he knew again, coming back to removing the anxiety, is he was a local. He knew where the charging infrastructure was. There was a couple of occasions, especially towards the end of the rally when I was on my own, and I didn't have a co-pilot, and in an area which is limited infrastructure, and I had limited local knowledge. Actually, I suppose the stress levels were slightly higher to think, actually, where is a charger? Where can I get to it? How do I find it? That sort of stuff. But on back to that actual trip, when the anxiety started to raise a notch was on some of the inclines, because that particular leg did have some lumps in it, and when you see the range pulling back to less than the distance that you've got remaining to the charge point, yes, it did. But at the same time, I've been fortunate in and around this arena for a number of years now. And you learn from those experienced people about how you manage the range, how you manage your right foot, and all the coaching and input I've had. So actually, he just made it all back up on the downhills. And it's the confidence of knowing it will come back that helps moderate that. And I guess it's the key thing that we keep talking about is educate drivers, coach them as to what this technology is, how to use it. How to toggle between the different regenerative braking modes, make use of the technologies that are now embedded in these vehicles. So we got there, we actually made up, we arrived with 9 kilometers of range left. So,
That's pretty impressive, my friend. Well done. How has the rally helped GreenFleet achieve its sustainable mobility aims?
So, on a personal, from a GreenFleet perspective and our mobility aims, we obviously run throughout Europe some 850,000 units, right? So we have to help our customers get those vehicles transitioned at the appropriate time, but as quickly as possible, and for the success for that business, as well as our own fleet ambitions with our own fleets. And some of the learnings, even from this rally, starting to think about we're starting to build software applications for A to B routing management that includes charging, and particularly around operational vehicles. That if you've got a daily working cycle for a vehicle, when do you charge it, for how long, and everything. It's quite an actual complex thought process for a business operation. But that's changed again this year, because we were probably thinking, okay, well, what about the overnights and where that? And going back to the right beginning of this conversation where we said charge when you stop, that's something that I'm now asking our business. Okay, how do we investigate where that starts to fit in, and where, well, they sometimes call it volt and bolt or whatever you want to term it, and instead of thinking about the longer ones and fitting that into operational planning cycles for route mapping and things like that. So that was a massive one.
So Richard, when we were on the EV rally, there was a very interesting learning about tyres and Bridgestone being your parent company. That was quite interesting. Tell us about it.
Yeah. So, everybody knows that a vehicle, the tyres are the only thing that's in contact with the road, and how important it is. And often that's linked to the safety aspect of being able to stop with the right safety level of tyres. But of course, an EV is predominantly about efficiency, and stopping distance and efficiency don't necessarily always correlate like for like. So, it's the first time I've driven a vehicle that has a specific tyre that's been designed for EV use. And I'm not a technical person by any stretch, but I was kind of saying that, for example, I think one of the things they've done is made the tyre thinner, use less rubber in the skin to bring the weight and everything else, and different compound mixes and things like that, different treads. But what I did notice, which is the fundamental bit about efficiency for driving with an EV, is that in the dry, I was getting about 4.1 miles per kilowatt hour out of the vehicle that I was in. And we had some pretty horrendous storms along the way, which put a lot of water onto the road and made them, typically that would have created quite a lot of drag, in the road for an EV. And I actually only lost 0.2 miles per kilowatt hour driving through those conditions.
Wow.
So it does say to me, when we talk about, sustainable mobility, how is it changing? It's not just the vehicles, it's not just the infrastructure, but it's every aspect of the things that contribute to the efficiency of these vehicles that are going to make the difference in making them usable and workable in business environments.
Wow. Now, when organizations are looking to transition their fleet, what are the key things that they need to think about in terms of public charging infrastructure, and what improvements might be made that can make it easier for fleets to make that transition?
Okay, so, well, I'm going to say this because this is the business we're in, as well as other organizations who do the same thing. But first of all, you've got to start with data and proper data of understanding where your vehicles are running and where they're stopping, and understanding how, the top telematics businesses, we all map on top of the charging stations where they are. So, there's correlation. It's easy to see where that public infrastructure is sat within the platforms, and overlaying that with where these vehicles are going. So start by doing your research, get the data in, understand vehicle by vehicle where you're operating, where they stop now, and think about what the vehicle actually does for your business operation. Does it need to do the same thing tomorrow, or can you adjust some of your business model and make that work to fit with the transition? Because we're all trying to transition, and we always hear we want the next vehicle to be doing the same as the last vehicle. That's not necessarily the answer. So go and think about what the vehicle actually does for your business. Do your research, get your data coming in, and then plan. And plan and understand how you're going to move it across and what that's going to be, and then coach your drivers, help them understand how to use that charging infrastructure. It's been well touted by you and numerous other people around, we want reliability. They've got to be easy to use. They've got to be simple. Now, I think we're getting there on that. I think the new chargers that are coming on stream and are being implemented have a much more simple approach to usage, but we can't get away from the legacy chargers that maybe weren't quite so simple or weren't quite so reliable. Those haven't moved on yet. So for each individual vehicle operating round, understand what the chargers are, understand where they are, and also get the drivers coached. I guess finally is do the research on the cards and the apps and try and minimize that. We know that we're trying to get to the, we know of certain organizations, I won't say them on here, but we worked very close with them and very successfully on the rally. We had a great experience using that single card across multiple operators. So, think about how your drivers are going to pay for that public infrastructure and make it as simple for the driver as possible in your thought processes.
Absolutely. The simplest piece of advice I can give is find a good friend like Richard Parker who can help you to understand and support you in that transition.
Yeah, and just on that, if a lot of organizations that we deal with predominantly, the roles of those individuals are specifically there to move their organizations through a transition. But for most of the businesses in the UK, they are time poor, knowledge poor in terms of doing this research. So to your point about a friend, when you start engaging in this, make sure that those organizations you start to engage with can introduce you to all the other organizations you are going to need to be working with through your transition, whether it's energy supply, infrastructure change, payment systems. Have that one person be able to help you through a number of different aspects of that transition as well, because it will save time and effort in the long run.
Absolutely. And working with GreenFleet, of course, is one of those ways that we can all do that, join together, be a network and move things forward.
Yeah. And listen to these podcasts, things like that, let's get them out there. Let's, because they're just little nuggets every now and then that just help people move it along the journey.
Richard, it was a delight to be on the rally with you. It's a delight to have you in my world, and I can't thank you enough for all you do.
And likewise, John. Thank you.